Practically every ancient culture on Earth, even most theologies, has tales of giants interacting with and even breeding with ancient man. But is there any scientific evidence to support these primeval legends? To begin with, science has realized that the ancient Earth was more conducive to gigantic life forms.
Is it possible that environmental conditions of past ages favored the development of giants? Certainly we know from fossil evidence that some species, like dinosaurs, grew many times larger than they do today. A supporter of this thought-provoking and controversial theory is Dr. Carl Bohr.
Optimal genetic expression means the best that the organism has within the DNA is expressed because of favorable atmospheric conditions.
Based on fossil evidence, trees like the California giant sequoia grew much larger than they do today. One theory explains this by proposing that environmental conditions in the distant past were more conducive to gigantic growth.
Under these described conditions, plants and animals would live longer, be much larger, and that's precisely what we find in the geologic column in the fossil record. Plants were much larger. All living systems were larger. We have animals that today have an 8 or 9 foot stature with a 16 to 20 foot stature. We have insects such as the dragonfly. Today, the dragonfly has perhaps a 4-inch wingspan. In the fossil record, his counterpart, Meganeuropsis, had up to a 5-foot wingspan. Everything was larger in the past.
I'm of the opinion that under better atmospheric conditions, people were living not only longer, but they were taller, much taller.
Giants and dinosaurs could not exist today as they did in the past because the atmospheric conditions simply will not permit it.
We had a greater ozone layer at the time prior to the flood. At the time of the flood, it was diminished to about 1/7 of what it was at that time, and therefore, life on this earth as we know it no longer has the same life expectancy as it did at the time of the flood.
A thinning of the ozone layer means less protection from the ionizing radiation from space, and less protection for plants and animals.
Being interested in Earth's original conditions, after 35 years of research on those parameters, I've attempted to reconstruct that context. And in so doing, I've had our engineers build a biosphere that doubles the atmospheric pressure, that increases the electromagnetic energy, that increases the ratio of oxygen, but not to the level of toxicity, that eliminates ultraviolet radiation, etc. And the experiments that we've run have been very gratifying. In our controlled scientific experiment, we have measured the effects of a pulsed electromagnetic field on biological systems. We have these Pacu piranha fish that normally at 3.5 years of age are about this size under optimal conditions. Yet we have them now in excess of 20 inches, weighing just under 5 pounds each. Under these controlled conditions, we have succeeded in producing giantism at an accelerated rate.
Taken at face value, the research looks persuasive, though it has not yet been replicated by other scientists.
The conclusion in the tradition seems to be fairly clear that gigantic beings were existing at one time, and that as human history developed, or physiological, emotional, spiritual changes took place, those beings who survived seemed to be of a smaller gene pool. But the possibility that there were other strands of humanity, as it were, seems to be almost explicitly stated in the Bible itself.
Fossils of giant human footprints have been discovered all across the globe. Along with the giant fossilized finger found in Africa. Now, archaeologists may have found the first scientifically accepted evidence of the giants.
2008, archaeologists made world headlines when they unearthed a Paleolithic finger bone from a juvenile female estimated to be 41,000 years old. Further DNA analysis indicated the finger was from a previously unknown and extinct hominin subspecies. These previously unknown ancestors were christened with the name Denisovan.
The Denisovans occupied large areas of Central, Southern and Eastern Asia for anything up to 200,000 years. They've told us, for instance, that many modern-day human populations in the eastern part of the Eurasian continent have the DNA which has been inherited from the Denisovans in a similar manner to how the people of the western Eurasian continent have DNA within them of the Neanderthals. They were of extreme size, not just broad, but of extreme height, perhaps even as much as 7 feet tall. But the DNA from these fossil remains have told us so much.
Artifacts found in recent archaeological digs at the cave suggest that the Denisovans were not only large, but highly intelligent. Some scientists, like Jack Carey, believe they had the ability to create sophisticated technology.
The Denisovans had to be much more advanced than what they're being credited with. I say that because of the discovery of a piece of jewelry that they found in the original Denisovan cave that dated 40,000 years ago. It was made of a green polished rock, and anthropologists believe that this jewelry was only worn on very special occasions. That indicates a culture. It indicates art. It indicates a higher understanding of reality. These aren't people that were simply clubbing animals to death and using their furs. These were people that were literally constructing jewelry. That's something a lot of anthropologists are uneasy with because it shows a depth of understanding and beauty in their culture that really shouldn't have existed with such ancient hominids.
Andrew Collins has been monitoring the movement of this ancient giant human species and has a different theory.
We can say almost certainly is that because our ancestors interbred with them, that there were hybrids of Denisovans and Homo sapiens that continued their traditions.
Built like in a brick wall. All of them have straight angles like a castle. There are thousands of clues that say this formation is built by a form of intelligence.
The beauty and precision of this 130-foot structure has left archaeologists with no explanation for how such an arrangement could have formed naturally. Geologists have estimated that the largest blocks of granite at Mount Shoria weigh 3,000 to 4,000 tons. Before this, the pregnant woman stone of Baalbek, weighing 1,500 tons, was the largest single stone used in an ancient site.
You have these beautiful polygonal walls. They are perfect straight lines and perfect right angles. You have these massive blocks of granite that look like this. Someone's taken a big diamond drill and sawed them right down the middle. On granite, that takes effort. The Russian scientists that went there, they discovered some things which cannot be explained by nature, which are these beautiful round, almost pot surfaces where they've taken a drill and they've formed a perfect depression. And they also had these perfect tunnels and these doorways that seem to be very deliberately put there. So maybe what we're doing here is taking an entire mountain that's been completely shaped by human hands.
If Georges Sidorov's discovery is real, could it be evidence that remote Siberia was once home to an advanced civilization? Near this discovery of the megalithic wall, scientists believe they have found bones from a new species. Could these places be linked?
According to both the fossil record and our genetics, our species has existed for 200,000 years. But the Rh-negative blood types are a fairly recent addition humanity only gained around 30 or 40,000 years ago. Researchers in Sardinia have found evidence that the Rh-O blood type may have come from crossbreeding with giants.
The island of Sardinia is located in the Mediterranean Sea just south of Corsica and west of the Italian peninsula. During the age of the Roman Empire, Sardinia was home to Roman colonies and governed by Roman prefects. But little is known about the history of the island before the Roman occupation. What is known is that an ancient race of megalith builders called the Nuragic civilization once inhabited Sardinia thousands of years ago. The Nuragic civilization is shrouded in mystery and legend. No one knows exactly who they were, but the ruins of their megalithic towers called Nuragi bear witness that they were mighty builders. Nuragi towers were constructed with large, uncut stones in the Cyclopean style without the use of mortar. Some of the towers were relatively small, while others were astonishingly large, rising over 100 feet into the air. There are over 7,000 ruined Nuragi towers still standing in Sardinia today. But archaeologists estimate that at one time there were more than 30,000 of them all over the island.
Everywhere you go in Sardinia, you find the ruins of the Nuragi towers and the stone rubble belonging to other megalithic constructions that once populated the landscape. Having traveled extensively all over the island, I am amazed that so little attention has been given to this place by archaeologists, considering how anomalous it is in regards to the sheer quantity of megaliths that were once present. But even more remarkable than the abundance of megaliths is the abundance of evidence pointing to the unassailable reality that Sardinia was once inhabited by a race of giants.
In May of 2019, host of Open Minds, Regina Meredith, led a team of researchers with the help of Gaia to see if they could investigate a series of giant bones belonging to a man named Luigi Muscas on the island of Sardinia. In his book titled The Giants of Sardinia, he boasts pictures of very large human bones and DNA results done by the University of Padova in Italy. The remains tested showed an O blood type, Rh negative. This is interesting because Sardinia is one of the few places in the world with the highest concentration of the Rh negative O blood type today. Luigi believes this genetic lineage was the result of their ancestors of giant stature. If this is true, is it possible we can find more evidence of this DNA lineage throughout the ancient text? What will this reveal about the true history of humanity in relation to an ancient race of giants and possibly their interactions with Homo sapiens sapiens?
Whether you label it the Great Flood or the scientific term of the Younger Dryas event, it is known that around 12,000 years ago, the Ice Age abruptly ended and sea levels rose across the world over 150 feet or so. And since 90% of settlements and populations have always lived at the sea, that would have been a cataclysmic and devastating flood for most of the earth. The civilization of giants was destroyed, but there were survivors as scripture details.
In the book of Numbers, we are told that after wandering in the desert with his people, Moses sent out scouts to find a place where they could settle. The scouts went north to Hebron. On their return, they reported, "All the people we saw there are men of gigantic size. We felt no bigger than grasshoppers, and that is how we looked to them. The tribes continued northeast to Mount Seir, known today as Petra in Jordan. But that too, as mentioned in the Bible, had been settled by giants.
Different groups of giants survived, as the Bible details, but Scripture isn't the only historical record of the giants.
Beyond the biblical accounts, such as David and Goliath, there are the accounts of the Babylonian king Gilgamesh. In stone tablets that have been recovered, there are images carved of Gilgamesh taking on a lion. In looking at the scale of the ancient carvings, it appears this man had to have been at least 12 to 15 feet tall, taking into consideration the size of the lion he is portrayed to have slain. Gilgamesh lived sometime between 2800 and 2500 BC. He is the main character in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Mesopotamian poem that is considered the first great work of literature. According to the Sumerian king list, Gilgamesh ruled his city for 126 years. Fragments of an epic text found in Maturin, the modern Tel Hadad, relate that at the end of his life, Gilgamesh was buried under the riverbed. It is generally accepted that Gilgamesh was a historical figure, since inscriptions have been found which confirm the historical existence of other figures associated with him, such as the Aga of Kish. If Gilgamesh was a historical king, he probably reigned in about the 26th century BC. Where did Gilgamesh come from? In the Qumran scroll known as the Book of Giants, the names of Gilgamesh and Humbaba appear as two of the antediluvian giants. Could Gilgamesh have come from Atlantis, or be a direct descendant of antediluvian kings?
As the centuries went past, humans vastly outnumbered the giants, and they were persecuted and in need of a sanctuary. So the giants migrated to a new land.
If Denisovans roamed the earth for thousands of years, crossbreeding with other sapiens, it could explain how traces of their DNA have been found thousands of miles from Siberia in North America.
It is almost certain that the Denisovans and their hybrid descendants ended up coming into the Americas. Indeed, it's now been found that in several different Native American peoples, Denisovan DNA exists. And this proves that they were the giants of legend and that they are responsible for the human skeletons, the oversized human skeletons that are found in mound complexes all over North America.
I think we're just at the beginning of the process of unraveling the mystery of what all of this means. It's almost heretical to say so in context of modern anthropology, but I think we're going to have to revisit the out of Africa model. It may be that the evolution that led to anatomically modern humans didn't take place entirely in Africa. We're looking at actually a very complicated picture that ultimately results in us. No Denisovans live today. No Neanderthals live today. We are the sole survivors of that intermingling of slightly different and sometimes very different looking but genetically close human species.
The oral history of various Native American tribes speak of a time when giants attacked and cannibalized their people.
Legends about primitive giants in the United States is the story of the Si-Te-Ka, a tribe of red-headed and cannibalistic giants described by the native Paiute in Nevada. In 1911, though, fancy seemed to become fact with the finding of several mummified bodies in Nevada's Lovelock Cave that bore a close resemblance to the giants of local lore.
According to Native American Paiute oral history, the Si-Te-Ka are a legendary tribe whose mummified remains were allegedly discovered under 4 feet of guano by guano miners in what is now known as Lovelock Cave in Lovelock, Nevada. Several of the fiber sandals found in Lovelock Cave were remarkably large, and one reported at over 15 inches in length was said to be on display at the Nevada Historical Society's museum in Reno in 1952. The Paiute tradition asserts that the Sitka people practiced cannibalism, and this may have had some basis in fact. During the 1924 excavation of the cave, a series of 3 human bones were found near the surface towards the mouth of the cave. These had been split to extract the marrow, as animal bones were split, and probably indicate cannibalism during a famine. As reported in the Nevada Review-Minor newspaper on June 19, 1931, in February and June of 1931, 2 very large skeletons were found in the Humboldt dry lake bed near Lovelock. One skeleton was 8.5 feet tall and was later described as being wrapped in a gum-covered fabric not unlike Egyptian mummies. The other was almost 10 feet tall. It was said that all the tribes of the area stood together against these giants and chased them into a cave. The giants refused to leave the safety of the cave, so the Paiutes, along with other tribes, set the cave on fire. The cave then collapsed during an earthquake, sealing the entrance shut. When the area was mined for fertilizing materials, there were several fossils discovered in the early 1920s. Along with those fossils were the well-preserved human-like skeletons, one male and one female. The female was over 6 feet tall, and the male was over 8 feet tall. Along with the discovery of the skeletons, there were many other artifacts found, including a circular calendar. David Cusick, a Tuscaroran Indian, wrote in 1825 about a giant tribe called the Ranawakadwa in the Ohio Valley. In his account, he wrote that other smaller tribes grew tired of the giants attacking them, so with a force of 800 warriors, they killed all the Ranawakadwa people. After that, there were no more giants anywhere.
When Europeans first settled the United States, they found the land littered with thousands of earthen pyramids and mounds. They excavated the mounds to make way for their cities and roads, but discovered unique artifacts and giant skeletons in the process. Skeptics have argued that this was sensational news reporting, created only to sell papers. But researchers have found over 1,500 news articles detailing the discovery of giant bones in that era. So I would counter that it was actually a common story for the time period and not sensational at all. Then skeptics claim that these news stories are only meant for entertainment, and educated people of that time period didn't believe in giants. But here is a quote from President Abraham Lincoln after he first witnessed the glory of Niagara Falls.
In 1912, according to an article appearing in the New York Times, an exploration of ancient Indian burial mounds near Lake Develan, Wisconsin, uncovered 18 skeletons of enormous size, ranging between 7.5 to 10 feet tall. These remains, just like the ones later found on Santa Rosa Island, were also said to possess double rows of teeth and 6 fingers and toes. In the particular case of the Lake Delavan skeletons, their skulls were also reported to be elongated. Elsewhere in Wisconsin, an almost identical find had been unearthed from another burial mound in Maple Creek in 1897, this one of a man standing approximately 9 feet tall. And earlier still, in Potosi, Wisconsin in 1870, 2 giant skeletons between 7 and 8 feet tall were found, along with arrowheads and other mysterious artifacts. In addition, an Adena burial mound in Ohio also supposedly housed several oversized humans found in the late 19th century, and another skeleton of a man over 8 feet tall was also found nearly half a mile away from the mound in 1899. One of the Ohio reports even alleged that a large female skeleton was found cradling the remains of a baby more than 3 feet long. Several mound sites in West Virginia have also yielded impressive finds. In 1883, the Smithsonian reportedly unearthed the remains of several larger-than-average people beneath the South Charleston Mound. These skeletons, ranging from approximately 6'7" to 7'6", were surrounded by beautiful artifacts such as copper jewelry, spearheads, and other items of clearly religious significance. And in 1913, a 10-foot-tall skeleton, as well as several massive skulls, were reputedly recovered from the Ozark Caves near Beaver Lake in Arkansas, though a recent expedition to recover the remains failed to find them, as it's believed that the area had been subsequently flooded by the building of a dam in the early 1960s. Another 8-foot skeleton turned up in Steelville, Missouri in 1933. This one proclaimed to have been discovered by a young boy out looking for arrowheads. Photographs of the remains laid out next to a 6-foot-tall man were published alongside the article. And in this case, there was also mention of the Smithsonian taking the bones to be studied, only for them to supposedly vanish completely. More grist for the mill of conspiracy theories about the Smithsonian and their alleged suppression of the ancient giant phenomenon. Native American burial mounds in other parts of the country have also revealed their giant secrets over the years. An 1871 account from Cayuga, New York, for instance, described over 200 skeletons recovered from a mound site along the Grand River, all of which were between 7 and 9 feet tall. The grounds surrounding a nearby farm in Dunville also supportedly contained bodies of men twice the size of normal humans, and also artifacts such as beads and tomahawks. In Erie County, Pennsylvania, remains of an 11-foot individual were discovered in 1884, and was the body of a 9-foot man with a flat head at a site some distance away. And in 1892, also in Pennsylvania, workmen apparently stumbled across 2 enormous skeletons while digging a ditch in Beaver Falls. Further, in 1895, a whole parcel of huge skeletons was found in Deerfield, Massachusetts, with a witness describing one skull as big as a peck basket and pointing out the familiar detail of the double rows of teeth. These remains were said to be of individuals averaging around 8 feet tall. Another tall, double-toothed skeleton was discovered in Middlesbrough, Massachusetts in 1906, a second one in Rockingham, Vermont in 1907, and yet another in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts in 1908.
Only a small percentage of these earthen pyramids and mounds remain today. The largest is Cahokia, outside of St. Louis.
In the late summer of 1908, Collinsville, Illinois, near the Cahokia Mounds, construction workers accidentally unearthed a stone tomb that contained several giant bodies, each measuring over 7 feet tall. Following this discovery, the bodies quickly disappeared, only to add more mystery to the idea that a large species of humans once inhabited the Americas. What is left of this mysterious mound complex still baffles archaeologists today. Cahokia was considered the largest city north of Mexico, with a population between 25,000 and 50,000 in 1000 AD. This Native American civilization had an advanced system of waterways, agriculture, and textiles, and also many legends of what they referred to as the mound builders. Who were these mound builders? Could they be linked to the large bodies accidentally found in the ancient tomb? Is it possible that what they had stumbled upon was the remains of a great culture that not only roamed the Americas, but also the world?
In 1170, a mysterious fire destroyed the city when it was rebuilt. Defense walls were built and new buildings, which were all smaller and fortified. The city was never populated or as powerful following that fire. No one knows how the fire started, but the homes that burned were built with thatched roofs and were easily destroyed. Archaeologists have surmised that rebels burned the town and instituted a sun imagery that was used thereafter. But if you put the pieces of this puzzle together, you might come up with an entirely different history. Considering the tales of modern Native Americans, whose cultures related stories of the giants, you can imagine that they were the ones who burned Cahokia to destroy the giants within the city. When they rebuilt, the victorious Native Americans put up defenses and built much smaller homes to live in because they were not giants like their predecessors. The homes they built were more regulated in size and did not reflect the wealth and stature that the previous larger homes of the giants displayed.
Researcher Brad Olson suggests that these mounds themselves hold the key to these forgotten ancient beings.
It is true that giants have been found in the mounds in the Midwest. There are several different cultures in the Midwest. It started basically in the state of Ohio. It started with the Adena culture, which then became the Hopewell, and then it became the larger Mississippian culture that encompasses the entire Mississippi Valley. There are over 2,000 pyramidal mounds in North America, including Mexico.
So where are all these bones and evidence? According to these news articles, the Smithsonian quickly confiscated anything related to the giants, and it hasn't been seen since.
During the past few years, a huge controversy has emerged accusing the Smithsonian and a host of skeptics and archaeologists of covering up the discovery of hundreds of giant skeletons from Native American Indian mounds. During the time of these discoveries, the Smithsonian was taking possession of nearly every giant skeleton found throughout the entire country, including the largest discovery of skeletons found in the Great Mound in Ohio. What the intent of the institution was for the giant skeletons has never been discovered, but several investigators today believe the Smithsonian was founded, at least in part, to take the skeletons and hide or destroy them, dumping some by the bargeful in the Atlantic Ocean. Why, one might ask? Some believe it was to hide the true history of the Earth, as giant skeletons were being discovered throughout the world in the late 1800s. And some believe it was to back up Darwin's theory of evolution. If such entities lived on Earth thousands of years ago, then Darwin's theory would be automatically called into question. Never included in history books is the fact that every Native American tribe in America tells the same tale of having to fight and kill the giants because they were man-eaters and were decimating the native tribes. Perhaps because the giants were so large, the tribes mounded dirt to bury them instead of digging graves, which would explain the hundreds, if not thousands, of mound burial sites throughout America.
Now, all that remains of the giants is the little traces that pop up in our DNA from time to time.